In 1920s Australia, Bulimba Reach was a popular fishing spot for locals and tourists alike. Today, it is a premier suburb of Brisbane. Its streets are lined with cafes, restaurants, and boutiques. Public jetties offering ferries to the other side of the river are dotted along the riverside, and waterfront walking tracks are busy with pedestrians and cyclists. On the morning of Sunday, November 27, 1921, Herbert Jack and his friend Thompson decided to take their young sons fishing on the Brisbane River. The four of them headed down to Gay's Corner on the Bulimba Reach section of the Brisbane River. The river flows through the city of Brisbane and out into Moreton Bay. Herbert worked on the riverside in the suburb of New Farm. He was familiar with the water and frequently fished the area. It was planned to be an enjoyable morning out, but it turned into a tragic disaster. The group carried their fishing gear from their vehicle down to the riverbank. They were going to use their dinghy, which was moored just 10 yards from the bank. But first they had to get there. Although the water was only shallow, Herbert offered to carry his 8-year-old son, George, onto his shoulders and wade across to the boat. It was morning time. The sky was overcast and gray, but there were people out and about. Boats motored out to sea from the river, and people strolled along the riverbank. That particular section of the river was an area that was known to be frequented by sharks. At the time, a whaling station was situated at the mouth of the river in Moreton Bay. Whale carcasses were processed there. The blood, juices, and waste tissues were washed into the water, enticing sharks upstream from the open ocean. Even today, bull sharks are known to give birth to their pups in the river, and there are thought to be around 500 that frequent the estuarine waters of the Brisbane River. In fact, during a flood in 2010, a bull shark was seen swimming along the streets of the city. They are dangerous, aggressive, opportunistic hunters and are one of the most likely species to attack people. They are drawn to the estuary for the promise of abundant fish and other wildlife that they prey on. As Herbert stepped into the water with his son on his shoulders, he didn't know that there was a bull shark just yards upstream from him. He waded into the river, heading for the little boat that bobbed up and down on the surface. It was tied by its bow to a small buoy, securing it close to the shore. When Herbert was just yards from the bank and in 3 feet of water, he felt a sharp tug on his right hip. He immediately looked down and saw the terrifying head of a shark. Its skin was dark gray beneath the water. Its black eye looked up at him as it rolled onto its side, tearing Herbert's skin. He cried out in alarm and tried to free himself, shaking his leg and pulling away. He gripped his son's legs with his left hand, whilst punching the shark with his right. He brought his fist down heavily on top of the enormous fish again and again. It was like punching hard sandpaper. The skin was rough and abrasive, the snout of the shark hard and unforgiving. But the punching seemed to work. The shark let go for an instant, and Herbert thought that he was free and tried to turn back to the bank. But only a second later, the shark bit down again, this time biting his right buttock. With George on his shoulders, Herbert couldn't grapple with the shark very well, and he was struggling to keep his balance with the weight of his son on top of him. All he could do was continually hit the shark and hope that it let go long enough for him to make it back to the bank and dry land. In the midst of the attack, his friend, Thompson, ran into the water to help. The water was bubbling and boiling all around Herbert and George. The tail of the shark whipped up and out of the river as it thrashed around. With both men now hitting the shark, it let go for another second before raising its head up and out of the water and clamping its jaws down and around Herbert's right hand and lower arm. Herbert felt himself yanked and pulled towards the water. His face was just inches from the top of the shark's head as it pulled on his arm. The force of the animal was overpowering, and it felt as though it was going to rip Herbert's arm from his body. George began to slip and slide on his father's shoulders. Herbert couldn't hold on to him forever. and in all the commotion he was losing his grip on George. The water turned red as the shark continued to clamp its powerful jaws down around Herbert's arm, and Herbert couldn't hit the shark anymore, as he was using his other arm to hold on to his son. The more he tried to pull himself backwards and away from the shark, the more it tugged at him, threatening to pull him off his feet and under the water. It persisted in the attack, and moments later, Thompson flung himself at the shark. Miraculously, it released its grip around the young father, but when it let go, Herbert stumbled slightly, and, in a heart-stopping moment, George fell from his shoulders. The two men watched in shock as the 8-year-old hit the water with a loud smack. Before they could grab the youngster and pull him out of the water, the shark wheeled around and came back again. This time it grabbed onto George, and he let out a terrified yell as he was dragged underwater. The two men tried to fight the shark off, but it dived below the surface with young George in its jaws. Frantically, Thompson searched for George below the water, but there was no sign of him. He had disappeared into the depth of the river. Only the ripples from the attack remained. All was silent for a second. Then, moments later, the boy resurfaced. He was still alive, but only just. His head bobbed above the river's surface for a split second that forever haunted those who witnessed it. The shark had let go of him for a moment, and he coughed and spluttered above the water, holding his arms out to Herbert and Thompson, a desperate look in his eyes. The two men rushed over to him, but before they could reach him, the dorsal fin of the shark broke through the surface of the water. It was coming back for the boy. It hadn't finished with him yet. In the most heartbreaking moment for Herbert, he watched, helpless, as the gray head of the shark emerged once more and grabbed George. The boy was dragged under the water again. This time, he didn't resurface. The two men screamed into the water, desperate to get George back, but there was nothing they could do, and Herbert was losing blood fast. A police launch boat happened to motor past them, and they shouted at them to help. They immediately launched a search for George, scouring the length of the river, peering into the depths, and searching along the riverbank in case he had made it out. But it was no use. He had been taken by the shark, likely to the depths of the river or out towards the open sea. He was never seen again, and an extensive search for his body found nothing. Herbert had lost his son in the most horrific way imaginable, but he still had to fight for his own life. The shark had taken a deep bite out of his right thigh and buttock. It had severed the skin and muscle on his right hand and arm, all the way up to his elbow. As he stood in shock in the waist-high water, blood dripped into the river, turning it red all around him. The polluted water was washing the open wounds. Bacteria were entering his bloodstream, and he needed urgent medical attention. The police had called emergency services, and Herbert was rushed to Brisbane General Hospital. He was in bad shape and spent the night in critical condition. His family and friends didn't know if he was going to make it. Not only had he lost a significant amount of blood from the attack, but his body was infected from the shark bite and the polluted river water. He was at risk of sepsis and blood poisoning. The following day, the gaping wounds on his leg, buttock, and arm were sutured back up, and a drain fitted for all the excess fluid. But the wounds were the least of his worries. His temperature was soaring as his body tried to stave off infection. Doctors tried to stabilize him and keep the infection from taking over. His temperature gradually came down over the following days. But just when it was starting to ease and looked like things were heading in the right direction, it soared back up again, threatening to take his life. A week after the attack, Herbert underwent another surgery to try and keep the infection at bay. He was watched and monitored closely by hospital staff and was finally discharged from hospital on February 21, 1922, 3 months after the attack. Despite surviving this horrific attack, he was devastated. He put all the blame on himself for not being able to protect his son that day. Not a day goes by without that tragic day replaying in his mind, the day his son, George Jack, met his terrifying final affliction. For 15-year-old Kai Cowley, Surfing was in his blood. He was a third-generation surfer at the Southern Adelaide Surf Club, and he certainly had a flair for the sport. He was drawn to the water since before he could walk, and joined the Micrograms Junior Surf Club at the age of 7. Riding the waves along Australia's coastline, there was no feeling like it. And although Kai enjoyed just about every other sport out there, from skateboarding and soccer to basketball and biking, surfing was his one true love. By the age of 10, he was competing for Seaview Roadboard Riders, one of the oldest clubs in Australia that was founded in 1964. His family were supportive of his surfing endeavors, and very soon their weekends were filled with road trips to various surfing competitions up and down the country. But it would be Kai's love and passion for the sport that would lead to tragedy when he was just 15 years old. The young rider hit the waves with his dad at Ethel Beach on the York Peninsula. Situated approximately 100 miles west of Adelaide, the surfing spot is considered one of the best in the state when the waves are right. Ethel's Ledge provides surfers with challenging conditions, which excellent surfers like Kai relished. But on December 28, 2023, the surf wasn't very good at Ethel Beach. The sky was overcast and gray as they made their way down to the beach. But they were on a family holiday and had traveled all the way there from their home in Adelaide. They weren't going to turn back now. As Kai entered the water, a great white shark swam beneath the waves. It was on the hunt, an opportunistic feeder that continually scoured the oceans for its next meal. Sharks are more likely to attack people when skies are overcast, whether they feel bolder due to the poorer lighting concealing their approach, or whether visibility in the water is worse, therefore causing them to attack out of mistaken identity, is up for debate. But there was danger in the water that day, and Kai and his father were unaware that they were surfing their last waves together. As the afternoon wore on, Kai caught a few waves. Despite being only 15, he could surf bigger waves than his dad. He carved through the water effortlessly, enjoying the thrill of the ride. It was his happy place. But for his father, it was about so much more than the surfing. Spending time with his son, traveling for miles and miles to find the greatest surf spots, and to take Kai to all the surf competitions. It was the road trips that his father really cherished, the time he spent just chatting with his son in the car. But those days were about to come crashing down to a tragic and devastating end. It was now 1:30 in the afternoon. As Kai paddled back to beyond the breakers to catch another wave, the shark spotted him from below. Its eyes locked onto its target, a shadowy silhouette bobbing about on the surface. The shark's killer instinct kicked in, and it headed directly towards Kai. As it came closer, its mouth slightly agape, showing hundreds of sharp teeth, it powered through the water. Weighing more than 700 kilograms, 1,500 pounds, it struck Kai with such force that he was knocked from his board. The shark grabbed his leg and tugged him underwater. He gasped as he realized what was happening. In those first frantic moments, the young boy managed to cry out, alerting his father, who had just caught a wave to the rocks. When he turned back, he could see Kai thrashing about in the water. The shark had hold of him and was tearing into his leg, but Kai fought back. His father ran along the rocks, yelling at his son to swim to him. There was a tragic desperation in his voice, seeing his son in so much trouble, but being powerless to stop it. The shark briefly let go, and Kai made a dash for it. He tried to swim to his father, who was yards away, but the boy was fading. The shark had severed an artery, and he was losing blood at an incredible rate. The water turned red all around him. The energy was flowing out of him. He would have felt faint, and moments later he lost consciousness. Local surfer Tim Phillips saw the attack unfolding from the top of a cliff face. Hearing the cries of Kai's father, he turned and saw the boy was in trouble. He ran down to the sandy beach, grabbing a stranger's surfboard before diving into the water. He paddled furiously towards Kai with little regard for his own safety. As he reached Kai, he could see that he was unconscious, just floating on the surface of the ocean with his eyes closed. He then saw the terrifying dark shadow of the shark. It was still there, It was watching, and it was waiting for the moment to strike again. It had attacked its victim and was now waiting for its prey to bleed out before going back in for more. Tim grabbed Kai, but as he began to pull him through the water, the shark began circling the both of them. He estimated it to be a 13-foot-long great white. He immediately let go of Kai when he saw the shark coming for them. His heart was pounding now, and he realized just how much danger he had put himself in. He began to turn and head back for the beach, not wanting to get caught up in the imminent attack. But then he saw the shark swim away and head out towards the open water. Now was his chance to secure Kai on the surfboard and get him back to shore. He grabbed Kai once more and paddled back to the beach. He pulled him into the shallows, and those on dry land rushed in to help. The emergency services were called and arrived at the remote location shortly afterwards, but Kai lay limp on the beach. He didn't respond to CPR attempts. The shark's bite had been too powerful and too strong. In the seconds that it had taken to tear into the young surfer's leg, he had lost too much blood and sadly couldn't be revived. Kai was the third person to be attacked and killed by a shark in Australian waters that year. Back in May, schoolteacher Simon Baccanello disappeared after being attacked by a shark whilst surfing, and then in October, 55-year-old Todd Gendel lost his life to a shark attack. It was deeply concerning for so many fatal attacks to be happening that year. For Kai to have lost his life at only 15 was simply devastating for all who knew him, least of all his family. What he loved more than anything in the world, more than surfing, was his family. He had grown up surfing with his uncle, and he spent huge amounts of time with his younger brother, Jet, playing with him, fooling around and surfing with him. He was a genuine and kind-hearted soul that was popular both in and outside school. The surfing fraternity pulled together to support the family. Financial support was set up to help them through their time of grief. Their lives would never be the same again, but with the love and support from the local community and those in the surfing world, they could see a light at the end of the tunnel. An emotional memorial service was held for Kai on the beach at his favorite surf spot, Seaford Beach. His father bravely read out his obituary, showing just how proud he was of his son. He took some peace knowing that Kai literally lived life to the fullest and packed in as much as he could in his 15 years. He never had a dull moment. He was always on the go and having fun. Hundreds of surfers gathered in the sea to say a final farewell to the young surfer who still had so much to offer. Attending the service were Kai's friends from the Port Noarlunga Football Club and those from his school, Carden College. They swam out beyond the breaking waves and sat on their boards, forming a guard of honor in true surfing tradition. There they floated in one huge circle to remember the skilled surfer who will be sorely missed. In the middle of the circle were Kai's mom, dad, and younger brother Jet. They all then proceeded to chant Kai's favorite mantra, "Just one more wave, just one more wave." And just like that, the sea at Seaford, that had been calm all day, began to swell, and the waves began to grow. Perhaps Kai was listening after all, wishing his family and friends goodbye after his terrifying final affliction. Lambert Beach in Queensland, Australia, is an area renowned for its surfing, which leads to thousands of visitors each year. Attracted by the huge swelling waves and the white sand beaches, it's hard to resist the pull of the ocean when it is presented so beautifully. With a lookout high in the cliff tops, visitors can get a stunning 360-degree view of the bay and might even get a glimpse of the whales breaching in the sunset. Despite the beauty of the beaches and clarity of the water, visitors must be careful of what lurks beneath the surface of the waves. In Queensland alone, there are over 100 different species of sharks, ranging from the harmless sharp-nosed sharks, measuring only 80 centimeters, to ferocious 6-meter tiger sharks. Although Australia ranks second only to the USA for the number of shark attacks per year in 2021, tourists and locals alike still flock to the beaches every day, knowing that a shark attack is a 1 in a million chance. Feeling safe, they will enter the water to swim or to surf. But what if you are the 1 in a million to be attacked? On December 28, 1961, Margaret Hobbs and her fiancé, Hans Steffens, were visiting Lambert Beach together. They had only recently gotten engaged and were excited to begin their lives together, Margaret being only 18 years old at the time and Hans being 24. Margaret was training to be a school teacher, although she was currently working in a classroom as a student as she had only recently left school herself, while Hans was a salesman. They had both taken time away from work and decided to take a holiday together to celebrate their engagement. They had a lovely day together. The sun was shining and they were basking in the 82-degree heat as they watched the sea. It was getting late, so they decided to get the sand off of them before they went home, racing each other into the water. They didn't go in very deep, only 3 feet deep, and started splashing each other. They were the picture of young love, ready to build a life and a family together. This bliss would soon be shattered irreparably. The couple were simply standing in the water, about 10 feet away from the shore, and chatting, when Hans felt a sharp pain hit his right hand. But before he could even look down to investigate the cause, he was suddenly dragged under the waves. He felt the water rush around him, and he was blinded by the pain in his arm, as well as the seawater stinging his eyes. He realized that his arm was in the jaws of a large 3-meter shark, and it was trying to pull him into deeper water to take advantage of its natural habitat. The pain was intense, and for a short while, Hans tried to reassess his situation. He knew that if he didn't act soon, he would shortly be killed and eaten by this animal. And so, with a burst of adrenaline, he pulled his arm from its mouth, causing him to start bleeding profusely into the water. He screamed out in pain as skin and muscle was torn from his arm, leaving him flayed and screaming in agony. Fueled by bloodlust, the shark lunged for Margaret next, and she was quickly pulled underwater next, disappearing right in front of Hans' eyes. She screamed out, but any sounds were quickly muffled as the water filled her mouth, forcing her into silence. She fought back to escape, but the shark had a strong grip on her arm and continued to rip at as much of her body as it could. Hans immediately began to beat the shark in an attempt to get it off of his fiancée and shouted for help to those on the beach. He reached under the water and tried to pull her from the shark's mouth, but the animal was determined and would not release her quite so easily. Graham Jorgensen had witnessed the attack and bolted into the water to help the couple and try to save Margaret as she shrieked in pain. The two men worked together to beat the shark until it relented and let go of Margaret, where they were able to then drag her from the water. The shark remained close by, seemingly watching the people on the shore and waiting for another opportunity to strike and finish its hunt. Her ordeal with the shark was over, but she was anything but safe. She now needed to survive her injuries. She was laid out into the sand while onlookers came to check what all the noise was about, and Margaret could do nothing but lay there and look for her fiancé. She felt herself become cold as her blood seeped into the sand, and she slowly came to the realization that she would not survive this attack. Luckily for this pair, a nurse was also on the beach, enjoying her day off, when she heard the commotion further down the beach. She was called to assist, and the sight of Margaret was a lot to take in. Her right arm had been severely bitten, and her bone was protruding at an awful angle from her shoulder blade. Her left arm was completely missing and had already been eaten by the shark, leaving it impossible to retrieve. Her right thigh had been torn apart, her skin clinging to her body by a thread. She was clearly in a terrible state, but the nurse knew exactly what she needed to do to help save Margaret's life. She began tying tourniquets around the wounds, while other beachgoers phoned for an ambulance, stressing to the paramedics that they needed to hurry as it was possible that Margaret would pass away in minutes. The tourniquets worked to stabilize her, and everything tried to keep her conscious through the wait. She was no longer screaming. The adrenaline had thankfully numbed the pain of her torn body, and she tried to talk with Hans as she knew she did not have long left, needing comfort from the only person from which she could receive it. Finally, the ambulance arrived and the couple were taken to Mater Hospital in Mackay, where they were separated. Both had to undergo extreme operations in an attempt to save their lives. Hans' right arm was surgically amputated as it was too damaged to use again, leaving him permanently disabled. Luckily, he did not sustain any other injuries, so despite the loss of his arm, he was incredibly lucky. Comparatively, Margaret did not have such luck. Her right leg had to be amputated also. The attack cost her her left arm and now right leg, a life-changing disfigurement. She remained in the hospital for 2 days while the doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to save her life. Her story had made national news, and people all around the country were praying for her recovery. It was discovered that she had a very rare blood type, and the hospital did not have a large amount of this type in stock. They put out an urgent alert for blood donors, and miraculously, people answered the call. They arrived in large groups to local Red Cross blood bank, but it was all futile. It was announced on December 30th that she had passed away at 6:55 that evening, and a united sense of grief flooded the nation. It was announced that she had died from toxemia and secondary shock, a fate that couldn't have been changed even with all the donated blood available. Margaret's story shook the nation, a young couple just enjoying their holiday at the beach before everything was ripped away from them in an instant. The next day, several boats set off from Lambert Beach in search of the man-eater, and a number of sharks were caught as a result, although none fit the description of the attacker or showed any signs that they could be responsible. The residents understood that there was nothing that they could do. The witch hunt was called off, and instead, shark prevention programs were installed. Shark nets were spread across the Queensland shores to ensure that sharks keep their distance and protect the swimmers as they tried to enjoy their time at the beach without the incident being repeated. By November 1962, shark nets had been laid across several beaches in Australia, from Southport and Coolangatta in the south to Caloundra and Noosa in the north. Although her story was horrific and the ending was unthinkable, it is possible that Margaret's death saved many lives, as the shark attack statistics dramatically fell following the installation of the shark nets. Although this does not decrease the pain and suffering that she would have felt in her final moments, it is a small solace that others were saved from the same fate. It is still unknown what species had attacked the couple that day in the shallow 3-foot waters, although a tiger shark is thought to be the most likely culprit. Tiger sharks are known for launching unprovoked attacks on humans and multiple aggressive bites to the victim's body. They are also notorious for hunting in shallow water, although we will never know for sure what species had attacked the couple that day. Although the nets surrounding the beaches of Australia have drastically reduced the number of sharks that make it into the shallow waters, some sharks are able to get through. The nets often break after animals get tangled in the net, allowing a place for sharks to enter the beaches. Despite the numerous different shark prevention systems available, none of them are 100% effective. And as long as people are willing to swim in water known for sharks, nothing can stop the occasional swimmer from meeting their terrifying final affliction.